Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm glad you all could be here with me tonight. How are we doing today? Today, I have a special treat for you all, and we are going to be doing our first read along stream. Sounds a bit muffled. One second. How's this then? Is this a little better? No treat. Okay, so today we're going to do our first read along stream, and the story that I have selected is one of my personal favorite Sherlock Holmes stories, that being called The Hound of the Baskervilles. Now, this one is a fairly popular one compared to the first ever adventure, Study in Scarlet, or some of the other ones, because this is the one that often gets movie adaptations. So, I figure we may as well start off with a more well known one, and then we can dig into maybe some of the more lesser known books. So, without any further ado, this is The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, I will be doing voices for this. Please don't mind too much. Chapter 1: Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, who was usually very late in the mornings, save upon those not infrequent occasions when he was up all night, was seated at the breakfast table. I stood upon the hearthrug and picked up the stick, which our visitor had left behind him the night before. It was a fine, thick piece of wood, bulbous-headed, of the sort which is known as a Penang lawyer. Just under the head was a broad silver band nearly an inch across. To James Mortimer, M.R.C.S., from his friends at the C.C.H., was engraved upon it, with the date 1884. It was just such a stick as the old-fashioned family practitioner used to carry, dignified, solid, and reassuring. "Well, Watson, what do you make of it?" Holmes was sitting with his back to me, and I had given him no sign of my occupation. "How did you know what I was doing? I believe you have eyes in the back of your head." "I have, at least, a well-polished, silver-plated coffee-pot in front of me," said he. "But tell me, Watson, what do you make of our visitor's stick? Since we have been so unfortunate as to miss him and have no notion of his errand, this accidental souvenir becomes of importance. Let me hear you reconstruct the man by an examination of it." "I think," said I, following as far as I could the methods of my companion, "that Dr. Mortimer is a successful elderly medical man, well esteemed, since those who know him gave him this mark of their appreciation." "Good," said Holmes. "Excellent. I think also that the probability is in favor of his being a country practitioner who does a great deal of his visiting on foot." "Why so?" "Because this stick, though originally a very handsome one, has been so knocked about that I can hardly imagine a town practitioner carrying it. The thick iron ferrule is worn down, so it is evident that he has done a great amount of walking with it." "Perfectly sound," said Holmes. "And then again there is the Friends of the C.C.H. I should guess that to be the something hunt, the local hunt to whose members he has possibly given some surgical assistance, and which has made him a small presentation in return." "Really, Watson, you excel yourself," said Holmes, pushing back his chair and lighting a cigarette. "I'm bound to say that in all the accounts which you have been so good as to give of my own small achievements, you have habitually underrated your own abilities. It may be that you are not yourself luminous, but you are a conductor of light. Some people without possessing genius have a remarkable power of stimulating it. I confess, my dear fellow, that I am very much in your debt." He had never said as much before, and I must admit that his words gave me keen pleasure, for I had often been piqued by his indifference to my admiration and to the attempts which I had made to give publicity to his methods. I was proud, too, to think that I had so far mastered his system as to apply it in a way which earned his approval. He now took the stick from my hands and examined it for a few minutes with his naked eyes. Then, with an expression of interest, he laid down his cigarette and, carrying the cane to the window, he looked over it again with a convex lens. "Interesting, though elementary," he said, as he returned to his favorite corner of the settee. "There are certainly one or two indications upon the stick. It gives us the basis for several deductions." "Has anything escaped me?" I asked with some self-importance. "I trust that there is nothing of consequence which I have overlooked." "I am afraid, my dear Watson, that most of your conclusions were erroneous. When I said that you stimulated me, I meant, to be frank, that in noting your fallacies, I was occasionally guided towards the truth. Not that you are entirely wrong in this instance. The man is certainly a country practitioner, and he walks a good deal. Then I was right, to that extent. But that was all." "No, no, my dear Watson, not all. By no means all. I would suggest, for example, that a presentation to a doctor is more likely to come from a hospital than from a hunt, and that when the initials CC are placed before that hospital, the words Charing Cross very naturally suggest themselves." "You may be right. The probability lies in that direction, and if we take this as a working hypothesis, we have a fresh basis from which to start our construction of this unknown visitor. Well then, supposing that CCH does stand for Charing Cross Hospital, what further inferences may we draw? Do none suggest themselves? You know my methods. Apply them." "I can only think of the obvious conclusion that the man has practiced in town before going to the country." "I think that we might venture a little farther from this. Look at it in this light. On what occasion would it be most probable that such a presentation would be made? When would his friends unite to give him a pledge of their goodwill? Obviously at the moment when Dr. Mortimer withdrew from the service of the hospital in order to start in practice for himself. We know there has been a presentation. We believe there has been a change from a town hospital to a country practice. Is it then stretching out inference too far to say that the presentation was on the occasion of the change?" "It certainly seems probable." "Now, you will observe that he could not have been on the staff of the hospital, since only a man well established in a London practice could hold such a position, and such a one would not drift into the country. What was he then? If he was in the hospital and yet not on the staff, he could only have been the house surgeon or house physician, little more than a senior student. And he left 5 years ago, the date is on the stick. So your grave, middle-aged family practitioner vanishes into thin air, my dear Watson, and there emerges a young fellow under 30, amiable, unambitious, absent-minded, and the possessor of a favorite dog, which I should describe roughly as being larger than a terrier and smaller than a mastiff." I laughed incredulously as Sherlock Holmes leaned back in his settee and blew little wavering rings of smoke up to the ceiling. "As to the latter part, I have no means of checking you," said I, "but at least it is not difficult to find out a few particulars about the man's age and professional career." From my small medical shelf, I took down the medical directory and turned up the name. There were several Mortimers, but only one who could be our visitor. I read his record aloud. Mortimer James, M.R.C.S., 1882, Grimpen, Dartmoor, Devon. House surgeon from 1882 to 1884 at Charing Cross Hospital. Winner of the Jackson Prize for Comparative Pathology with essay entitled "Is Disease a Reversion?" Corresponding member of the Swedish Pathological Society, author of Some Freaks of Atavism, Lancet 1882, Dewey Progress, Journey of Psychology, March 1883, medical officer for the parishes of Grimpen, Thorsley, and High Barrow. "No mention of that local hunt, Watson," said Holmes with a mischievous smile. "But a country doctor, as you have astutely observed. I think that I am fairly justified in my inferences. As to the adjectives, I said, if I remember right, amiable, unambitious, and absent-minded. It is my experience that it is only an amiable man in this world who receives testimonials, only an unambitious one who abandons a London career for the country, and only an absent-minded one who leaves his stick and not his visiting card after waiting an hour in your room. And the dog has been in the habit of carrying the stick behind his master. Being a heavy stick, the dog has held it tightly by the middle, and the marks of his teeth are very plainly visible. The dog's jaw, as seen in the space between these marks, is too broad in my opinion for a terrier, and not broad enough for a mastiff. It may have been— yes, by Jove, it is a curly-haired spaniel." He had risen and paced the room as he spoke. Now he halted in the recess of the window. There was such a ring of conviction in his voice that I glanced up in surprise. "My dear fellow, how can you possibly be so sure of that?" "For the very simple reason that I see the dog himself on our very doorstep, and there is the ring of its owner. Don't move, I beg you, Watson. He is a professional brother of yours, and your presence may be of assistance to me. Now is the dramatic moment of fate, Watson, when you hear a step upon a stair which is walking into your life, and you know not whether for good or for ill. What does Dr. James Mortimer, the man of science, ask of Sherlock Holmes, the specialist in crime? Come in." The appearance of our visitor was of surprise to me, since I had expected a typical country practitioner. He was a very tall, thin man, with a long nose like a beak, which jutted out between two keen grey eyes, set closely together and sparkling brightly from behind a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He was clad in a professional but rather slovenly fashion, for his frock coat was dingy and his trousers frayed. Though young, his long back was already bowed, and he walked with a forward thrust of his head and a general air of peering benevolence. As he entered, his eyes fell upon the stick in Holmes's hand, and he ran towards it with an exclamation of joy. "I am so very glad," said he. "I was not sure whether I had left it here or in the shipping office. I would not lose that stick for the world." "A presentation, I see," said Holmes. "Yes, sir. From Charing Cross Hospital." "From one or two friends there on the occasion of my marriage." "Dear, dear, that's bad," said Holmes, shaking his head. Dr. Mortimer blinked through his glasses in mild astonishment. "Why was it bad?" "Only that you have disarranged our little deductions. Your marriage, you say?" "Yes, sir. I married, and so left the hospital, and with it all hopes of a consulting practice. It was necessary to make a home of my own." "Come, come. We are not so far wrong after all," said Holmes. "And now, Dr. James Mortimer."
"Mr. Sir, Mr. A humble M.R.C.S."
"And a man of precise mind, evidently."
"A dabbler in science, Mr. Holmes." a picker-up of shells on the shores of the great unknown ocean. I presume that it is Mr. Sherlock Holmes whom I am addressing and not...
No, this is my friend, Dr. Watson.
Glad to meet you, sir. I have heard your name mentioned in connection with that of your friend. You interest me very much, Mr. Holmes. I had hardly expected so dolichocephalic a skull or so well-marked supraorbital development. Would you have any objection to my running my finger along your parietal fissure? A cast of your skull, sir, until the original is available, would be an ornament to my anthropological museum. It is not my intention to be fulsome, but I confess that I covet your skull. Sherlock Holmes waved our strange visitor into a chair. You are an enthusiast in your line of thought, I perceive, sir, as I am in mine, said he. I observe from your forefinger that you make your own cigarettes. Have no hesitation in lighting one. The man drew out paper and tobacco and twirled the one up in the other with surprising dexterity. He had long quivering fingers, as agile and restless as the antennae of an insect. Holmes was silent, but his little darting glances showed me the interest which he took in our curious companion. I presume, sir, said he at last, that it was not merely for the purpose of examining my skull that you have done me the honor to call here last night and again today. No, sir, no. Though I am happy to have had the opportunity of doing that as well. I came to you, Mr. Holmes, because I recognize that I am myself an unpractical man, and because I am suddenly confronted with a most serious and extraordinary problem. Recognizing as I do that you are the second highest expert in Europe.
Indeed, sir. May I inquire who is the honor to be the first? Asked Holmes with some asperity.
To the man of precisely scientific mind, the work of Monsieur Bertillon must always appeal strongly.
Then had you not better consult him?
I said, sir, to the precisely scientific mind, but as a practical man of affairs, it is acknowledged that you stand alone. I trust, sir, that I have not inadvertently...
Just a little, said Holmes. I think, Dr. Mortimer, you would do wisely if, without more ado, you would kindly tell me plainly what the exact nature of the problem is in which you demand my assistance. Chapter 2. The Curse of the Baskervilles.
I have in my pocket a manuscript,
said Dr. James Mortimer. I observed it as you entered the room, said Holmes.
It is an old manuscript.
Early 18th century, unless it is a forgery.
How can you say that, sir?
You have presented an inch or two of it to my examination all the time that you have been talking. It would be a poor expert who could not give the date of a document within a decade or so. You may possibly have read my little monograph upon the subject. I put that at 1730.
The exact date is 1742.
Dr. Mortimer drew it from his breast pocket.
This family paper was committed to my care by Sir Charles Baskerville, whose sudden and tragic death some 3 months ago created so much excitement in Devonshire. I may say that I was his personal friend as well as his medical attendant. He was a strong-minded man, sir, shrewd, practical, and as unimaginative as I am myself. Yet he took this document very seriously, and his mind was prepared for just such an end as did eventually overtake him.
Holmes stretched out his hand for the manuscript and flattened it upon his knee. You will observe, Watson, the alternative use of the long S and the short. It is one of several indications which enabled me to fix the date. I looked over his shoulder at the yellow paper and the faded script. At the head was written Baskerville Hall, and below in large scrolling figures 1742. It appears to be a statement of some sort, Yes, it is a statement of a certain legend which runs in the Baskerville family. But I understand that it is something more modern and practical upon which you wish to consult me.
Most modern, a most practical pressing matter which must be decided within 24 hours. But the manuscript is short and is intimately connected with the affair. With your permission, I will read it to you.
Holmes leaned back in his chair, placed his fingertips together, and closed his eyes with an air of resignation. Dr. Mortimer turned the manuscript to the light and read, in a high, cracking voice, the following curious old-world narrative.
Of the origin of the Hound of the Baskervilles, there has been many statements, yet as I come in a direct line from Hugo Baskerville, and as I had the story from my father, who also had it from his, I have set it down with all belief that it occurred even as is here set forth. And I would have you believe, my sons, that the same justice which punishes sin may also most graciously forgive it, and that no ban is so heavy that but that by prayer and repentance it may be removed. Learn then from this story not to fear the fruits of the past, but rather to be circumspect in the future, that those foul passions whereby our family has suffered so grievously may not again be loosed to our undoing. Know then that in the time of the Great Rebellion, the history by which the learned Lord Clarendon I most earnestly commend to your attention, the manor of Baskerville was held by Hugo of that name, nor can it be gainsaid that he was a most wild, profane, and godless man. This in truth his neighbours might have pardoned, seeing that saints have never flourished in these parts. But there was in him a certain wanton and cruel humour, which made his name a byword through the West. It chanced that the Hugo came to love, if indeed so dark a passion may be known under so bright a name, the daughter of a yeoman who held lands near the Baskerville estate. But the young maiden, being discreet and of good repute, would ever avoid him, for she feared his evil name. So it came to pass that one Michaelmas this Hugo, with 5 or 6 of his idle and wicked companions, stole down upon the farm and carried off the maiden, her father and brothers being from home, as he well knew. When they had brought her to the hall, the maiden was placed in an upper chamber, while Hugo and his friends sat down to a long carouse, as was their nightly custom. Now the poor lass upstairs was like to have her wits turned at the singing and shouting and terrible oaths which came up to her from below. For they say that the words used by Hugo Baskerville when he was in wine were such as might blast the man who said them. At last, in the stress of her fear, she did that which might have daunted the bravest or most active man, for by the aid of the growth of ivy which covered, and still covers, the south wall, she came down from under the eaves, and so homeward across the moor, there being 3 leagues betwixt the hall and her father's farm. It chanced that some little time later, Hugo left his guest to carry food and drink, with other worse things perchance, to his captive, and so found the cage empty, and the bird escaped. Then, as it would seem, he became as one that hath a devil. For rushing down the stairs into the dining hall, he sprang upon the great table, flagons and trenchers flying before him, and he cried aloud before all the company that he would that very night render his body and soul to the powers of evil if he might but overtake the wench. And while the revellers stood aghast at the fury of the man, one more wicked, or it may be more drunken than the rest, cried out that they should put the hounds upon her. Whereat Hugo ran from the house, crying to his grooms that they should saddle his mare and unkennel the pack, and giving the hounds a kerchief of the maid's, he swung them to the line, and so off full cry in the moonlight o'er the moor. Now, for some space the revellers stood agape, unable to understand all that had been done in such haste. But anon their bemused wits awoke to the nature of the deed,
which was like to be done upon the moorlands. Everything was now in an uproar, some calling for their pistols, some for their horses, and some for another flask of wine. But at length some sense came back to their crazed minds, and the whole of them, 13 in number, took horse and started in pursuit. The moon shone clear above them, and they rode swiftly abreast, taking that course which the maid must needs have taken if she were to reach her own home. They had gone a mile or two when they passed one of the night shepherds upon the moorlands, and they cried to him to know if he had seen the hunt. And the man, as the story goes, was so crazed with fear that he could scarce speak, but at last he said that he had indeed seen the unhappy maiden, with the hounds upon her track. But I have seen more than that, said he, for Hugo Baskerville passed me upon his black mare, and there ran mute behind him such a hound of hell, as God forbid should ever be at my heels. So the drunken squires cursed the shepherd and rode onward. But soon their skins turned cold, for there came a galloping across the moor, and the black mare, dappled with white froth, went past with trailing bridle and empty saddle. Then the revellers rode close together, for a great fear was on them. But they still followed over the moor, through each had he been alone, would have been right glad to have turned the horse's head. Riding slowly in this fashion, they came at last upon the hounds. These, though known for their valor and their breed, were whimpering in a cluster, at the head of a deep dip or goyle as we call it upon the moor, some slinking away, and some with starting hackles and staring eyes, gazing down the narrow valley before them. The company had come to a halt, more sober men as you may guess, than when they had started. The most of them would by no means advance, but 3 of them, the boldest, or it may be the most drunken, rode forward down the goyle. Now it opened into a broad space, in which stood 2 of those great stones, still to be seen there, which was set by certain forgotten peoples in the days of old. The moon was shining bright upon the clearing, and there in the center lay the unhappy maid where she had fallen, dead, of fear and of fatigue. But it was not the sight of her body, nor yet was it that of the body of Hugo Baskerville lying near her, which raised the hair upon the heads of these 3 daredevil roisterers, but it was that, standing over Hugo and plucking at his throat, there stood a foul thing, a great black beast shaped like a hound, yet larger than any hound that ever mortal eye has rested upon. And even as they looked, the thing tore the throat out of Hugo Baskerville, on which, as it turned its blazing eyes and dripping jaws upon them, the 3 shrieked with fear and rode for dear life, still screaming across the moor. One, it is said, died that very night of what he had seen, and the other twain were but broken men for the rest of their days. Such is the tale, my sons, of the coming of the Hound, which is said to have plagued the family so sorely ever since. If I have set it down, it is because that which is clearly known hath less terror than that which is but hinted at and guessed. Nor can it be denied that many of the family have been unhappy in their deaths, which have been sudden, bloody, and mysterious. Yet may we shelter ourselves in the infinite goodness of Providence, which would not forever punish the innocent beyond that 3rd or 4th generation which is threatened in Holy Writ. To that Providence, my sons, I hereby commend you, and I counsel you by way of caution to forbear from crossing the moor in those dark hours, when the powers of evil are exalted. This from Hugo Baskerville to his sons Roger and John, with instructions that they say nothing thereof to their sister Elizabeth. When Dr. Mortimer had finished reading the singular narrative, he pushed his spectacles up on his forehead, and stared across at Mr. Sherlock Holmes. The latter yawned and tossed the end of his cigarette into the fire.
Well,
Said he.
do you not find it interesting?
To a collector of fairy tales? Dr. Mortimer drew a folded newspaper out of his pocket.
Now, Mr. Holmes, we will give you something a little more recent. This is the Devon County Chronicle of May 14th of this year. It is a short account of the facts elicited at the death of Sir Charles Baskerville, which occurred a few days before that date.
My friend leaned a little forward and his expression became intent. Our visitor readjusted his glasses and began.
The recent sudden death of Sir Charles Baskerville, whose name has been mentioned as the probable Liberal candidate for Mid-Devon at the next election, has cast a gloom over the county. Though Sir Charles had resided at Baskerville Hall for a comparatively short period, his amiability of character and extreme generosity had won the affection and respect of all who had been brought into contact with him. In these days of nouveau riches, it is refreshing to find a case where the scion of an old county family, which has fallen upon evil days, is able to make his own fortune and just bring it back with him to restore the fallen grandeur of his line. Sir Charles, as is well known, made large sums of money in South African speculation. More wise than those who go on until the wheel turns against them, he realized his gains and returned to England with them. It is only 2 years since he took up his residence at Baskerville Hall, and it is common talk how large were those schemes of reconstruction and improvement which have been interrupted by his death. Being himself childless, it was his openly expressed desire that the whole countryside should, within his own lifetime, profit by his good fortune, and many will have personal reasons for bewailing his untimely end. His generous donations to local and county charities have been frequently chronicled in these columns. The circumstances connected with the death of Sir Charles cannot be said to have been entirely cleaned up by the inquest, but at least enough has been done to dispose of those rumors to which local superstition has given rise. There is no reason whatsoever to suspect foul play, or to imagine that death could be from any but natural causes. Sir Charles was a widower, and a man who may be said to have been in some ways of an eccentric habit of mind. In spite of his considerable wealth, he was simple in his personal tastes, and his indoor servants at Baskerville Hall consisted of a married couple named Barrymore, the husband acting as butler and the wife as housekeeper. Their evidence, corroborated by that of several friends, tends to show that Sir Charles' death has for some time been impaired, health has for some time been impaired, and points especially to some affection of the heart, manifesting itself in changes of color, breathlessness, and acute attacks of nervous depression.
Dr. James Mortimer, the friend and medical attendant of the deceased, has given evidence to the same effect.
The facts of the case are simple. Sir Charles Baskerville was in the habit every night before going to bed of walking down the famous yew alley of Baskerville Hall. The evidence of the Barrymores shows that this had been his custom. On the 4th of May, Sir Charles had declared his intention of starting next day for London, and had ordered Barrymore to prepare his luggage. That night he went out as usual for his nocturnal walk, in the course of which he was in the habit of smoking a cigar. He never returned. At 12 o'clock, Barrymore, finding the hall door still open, became alarmed, and lighting a lantern, went in search of his master. The day had been wet, and Sir Charles's footmarks were easily traced down the alley. Halfway down this walk there is a gate which leads out onto the moor. There were indications that Sir Charles had stood for some little time here. He then proceeded down the alley, and it was at the far end of it that his body was discovered. One fact which has not been explained is the statement of Barrymore that his master's footprints altered their character from the time that he passed the moor gate, and that he appeared from thence onward to have been walking upon his toes. One Murphy, The gypsy horse dealer was on the moor at no great distance at the time, but he appears by his own confession to have been the worse for drink. He declares that he heard cries, but is unable to state from what direction they came. No signs of violence were to be discovered upon Sir Charles's person, and though the doctor's evidence pointed to an almost incredible facial distortion, so great that Dr. Mortimer refused at first to believe that it was indeed his friend and patient who lay before him, it was explained that this is a symptom which is not unusual in cases of dyspepsia and death from cardiac exhaustion. This explanation was borne out by the post-mortem examination, which showed long-standing organic disease, and the coroner's jury returned a verdict in accordance with the medical evidence. It is well that this is so, for it is obviously of the utmost importance that Sir Charles's heir should settle at the Hall and continue the good work which has been so sadly interrupted. Had the prosaic finding of the coroner not finally put an end to the romantic stories which had been whispered in connection with the affair, it might have been difficult to find a tenant for Baskerville Hall. It is understood that the next of kin is Mr. Henry Baskerville, if he be still alive, the son of Sir Charles Baskerville's younger brother. The young man, when last heard of, was in America, and inquiries are being instituted with a view of informing him of his good fortune.
Dr. Mortimer refolded his paper and replaced it in his pocket.
Those are the public facts, Mr. Holmes, in connection with the death of Sir Charles Baskerville.
I must thank you, said Sherlock Holmes, for calling my attention to a case which certainly presents some features of interest. I had observed some newspaper comment at the time, but I was exceedingly preoccupied by that little affair of the Vatican cameos, and in my anxiety to oblige the Pope, I lost touch with several interesting English cases. This article, you say, contains all the public facts?
It does.
Then let me have the private ones. He leaned back, put his fingertips together, and assumed his most impassive and judicial expression.
In doing so,
said Dr. Mortimer, who had begun to show signs of some strong emotion,
I am telling that which I have not confided to anyone. My motive for withholding it from the coroner's inquiry is that the man of science shrinks from placing himself in the public position of seeming to endorse a popular superstition.
I had the further motive that Baskerville Hall, as the paper says, would certainly remain untenanted, if anything were done to increase its already rather grim reputation. For both these reasons, I thought that I was justified in telling rather less than I knew, since no practical good could result from it. But with you there is no reason why I should not be perfectly frank. The moor is very sparsely inhabited, and those who live near each other are thrown very much together. For this reason, I saw a good deal of Sir Charles Baskerville. With the exception of Mr. Frankland of Laughter Hall and Mr. Stapleton the naturalist, there are no other men of education within many miles. Sir Charles was a retiring man, but the chance of his illness brought us together, and a community of interest in science kept us so. He had brought back much scientific information from South Africa, and many a charming evening we have spent together discussing the comparative anatomy of the Bushman and the Hottentot. Within the last few months, it became increasingly plain to me that Sir Charles's nervous system was strained to the breaking point. He had taken this legend, which I have read you, exceedingly to heart, so much so that although he would walk in his own grounds, nothing would induce him to go out upon the moor at night. Incredible as it may appear to you, Mr. Holmes, he was honestly convinced that a dreadful fate overhung his family. And certainly the records which he was able to give of his ancestors were not encouraging. The idea of some ghastly presence constantly haunted him, and on more than one occasion he had asked me whether I had on my medical journeys at night ever seen any strange creature or heard the baying of a hound. The latter question he put to me several times, and always with a voice which vibrated with excitement.
I can well remember driving up to his house in the evening some 3 weeks before the fatal event. He chanced to be at his hall door. I had descended from my gig and was standing in front of him when I saw his eyes fix themselves over my shoulder and step past me with an expression of the most dreadful horror. I whisked round and had just time to catch a glimpse of something, which I took to be a large black calf passing at the head of the drive. So excited and alarmed was he that I was compelled to go down to the spot where the animal had been and look around for it. It was gone, however, and the incident appeared to make the worst impression upon his mind. I stayed with him all the evening, and it was on that occasion, to explain the emotion which he had shown, that he confided to my keeping that narrative which I read to you when first I came. I mention this small episode because it assumes some importance in view of the tragedy which followed, but I was convinced at the time that the matter was entirely trivial and that his excitement had no justification. It was at my advice that Sir Charles was about to go to London. His heart was, I knew, affected, and the constant anxiety in which he lived, however chimerical the cause of it might be, was evidently having a serious effect upon his health. I thought that a few months among the distractions of town would send him back a new man. Mr. Stapleton, a mutual friend who was much concerned at his state of health, was of the same opinion. At the last instant came this terrible catastrophe. On the night of Sir Charles's death, Barrymore, the butler, who made the discovery, sent Perkins, the groom, on horseback to me, and as I was sitting up late, I was able to reach Baskerville Hall within an hour of the event. Checked and corroborated all the facts which were mentioned at the inquest. I followed the footsteps down the yew alley. I saw the spot at the moor gate where he seemed to have waited. I remarked a change in the shape of the prints after that point. I noted there were no other footsteps save those of Barrymore on the soft gravel. And finally, I carefully examined the body, which had not been touched until my arrival. Sir Charles lay on his face, his arms out, his fingers dug into the ground, and his features convulsed with some strong emotion to such an extent that I could hardly have sworn to his identity. There was certainly no physical injury of any kind, but one false statement was made by Barrymore at the inquest. He said that there were no traces upon the ground round the body. He did not observe any, but I did. Some little distance off, but fresh and clear.
Footprints.
Footprints.
A man's or a woman's? Dr. Mortimer looked strangely at us for an instant, and his voice sank almost to a whisper as he answered.
Mr. Holmes,
they were the footprints of a gigantic hound. I realized that chapter was a little dense, and combined with the first chapter, I believe that this is as good a time as any for a summation, a brief summary, just to consolidate all the facts and to make sure everyone is on the same page. After all, these books are known for being quite dense and full of history, so without keeping the context in mind and without keeping all the facts straight, it's easy to get lost. I'm going to take this time now to do a quick SparkNotes version of the chapters 1 and 2, so that way nobody gets lost. Chapter 1 starts with John Watson discovering the walking stick of James Mortimer, and essentially does a thought exercise with Sherlock Holmes, in which he tries to use Holmes's own methods of deduction to figure out essentially the identity and lifestyle of the man it belongs to. Watson is wrong on a few counts, except for some of the things that he does get right. And as he and Holmes exchange this friendly bout of playfulness, they pull up a medical record of James Mortimer, who was a medical practitioner from 1882 to 1884 and was responsible, or at least involved, in a few notable papers. James Mortimer shows up uh, at their doorstep and they greet him, only to realize that the walking stick was not given as a gift for a career change, but as a marriage gift. Chapter 2 gives us the full reason for his visit, which is that on a manuscript dated 1742, there is an account from one Hugo Baskerville detailing essentially a bit of family history. And basically says that, in particular, Hugo Baskerville was a brash, violent man who basically kidnapped a woman when her family was out of town and brought her back to his place, locked her upstairs for obvious intent, and had a party with his friends for a while. While he was partying with his friends, this kidnapped woman escaped and fled down the moor to go back to her own house. Basically, there was a measure of 3 leagues separating the estate, the Baskerville estate, and her home. And upon discovering that she had fled, Hugo flew into a rage and ordered essentially a hunt for her. And so they basically were on her trail. And they chased her down the moor. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, a moor, in the sense of a place of land, is basically a wetland. It retains a lot of water. It has some close to the ground vegetation that grows. It's a very muddy area, so it's very easy to, have to wade through, and it's a very sort of swampy, yes. But in any case, so they chase this woman, and Hugo gets ahead of them, of the rest of the hunting party. And while the hunting party is behind him, essentially, his horse comes back. And just his horse. So they keep going to the area where the horse had fled from, and find the deceased bodies of both the escaped woman and Hugo Baskerville. But not just that. There is claim in the manuscript that there was a large, massive, black hound-like creature eating Hugo Baskerville. And so the 3 men who witnessed this all fled. One of them is purported to have died the same night out of fright from what he saw, and the other 2 were essentially driven insane. And then, so that establishes a little bit of family history of the Baskervilles. Immediately following, Dr. Mortimer withdraws another piece of paper, a newspaper article that describes the death of Sir Charles Baskerville, a descendant of Hugo, who was a well-to-do man, very well respected in his community, um, who was described by his butler, Barrymore, to have been found at the same moor that was reported to be cursed land for his family. The problem is that Dr. Mortimer knows Charles would not willingly go to the moor, for he was very superstitious and believed heavily that a curse was upon his family, and would not willingly go to the same place where his ancestor was slain. The chapter ends with Sherlock Holmes asking for information that has not been made publicly known, as he has expressed interest in the case, and Dr. Mortimer lets on that one of the things he has not told the public is that there were apparently hound footprints near the site of Charles's body. That brings us to the end of chapter 2. So that concludes the summary portions of chapters 1 and 2. I hope that kind of helped anyone who might be a little overwhelmed by the structure of the story, as well as the language, the older language used. I'm going to take this moment now to take a quick hydration break. After all this dramatic reading does do a little bit on a voice after an hour. So I'll be right back. Please take this time as well to get some water or stretch, get a snack for yourself, and we'll be right back. And we are back. Alright, everybody. Let's keep this going and start chapter 3. Chapter 3. The Problem. I confess that at these words a shudder passed through me. There was a thrill in the doctor's voice which showed that he was himself deeply moved by that which he told us. Holmes leaned forward in his excitement, and his eyes had the hard, dry glitter which shot from them when he was keenly interested. "You saw this,
As clearly as I see you.
and you said nothing.
What was the use?
How was it that no one else saw it?"
The marks were some 20 yards from the body, and no one gave them a thought. I don't suppose I should have done so had I not known this legend.
There were many sheepdogs on the moor.
No doubt, but this was no sheepdog.
You say it was large,
Enormous.
but it had not approached the body.
No.
What sort of night was it?
Damp and raw.
But not actually raining.
No.
What is the alley like?
There are 2 lines of old yew hedge, 12 feet high and impenetrable. The walk in the center is about 8 feet across.
Is there anything between the hedges and the walk?
Yes, there is a strip of grass about 6 feet broad on either side.
I understand that the yew hedge is penetrated at one point by a gate.
Yes, the wicket gate, which leads on to the moor.
Is there any other opening?
None.
So that to reach the yew alley, one either has to come down it from the house, or else to enter by the moor gate.
There is an exit through a summer house at the far end.
Had Sir Charles reached this?
No, he lay about 50 yards from it.
Now, tell me, Dr. Mortimer, and this is important. The marks which you saw were on the path and not on the grass.
No marks could show on the grass.
Were they on the same side of the path as the moor gate?
Yes, they were on the edge of the path on the same side as the moor gate.
You interest me exceedingly. Another point. Was the wicket gate closed?
Closed and padlocked.
How high was it?
About 4 feet high.
Then anyone could have got over it.
Yes.
And what marks did you see by the wicket gate?
None in particular.
Good heaven, did no one examine?
Yes, I examined myself.
And found nothing?
It was all very confused. Sir Charles had evidently stood there for 5 or 10 minutes.
How do you know that?
Because the ash had dropped twice from his cigar.
Excellent. This is a colleague, Watson, after our own heart. But the marks?
He had left his own marks all over that small patch of gravel. I could discern no others.
Sherlock Holmes struck his hand against his knee with an impatient gesture. If I had only been there,
He cried.
It is evidently a case of extraordinary interest, and one which presented immense opportunities to the scientific expert. That gravel page upon which I might have read so much has been long ere this smudged by the rain and defaced by the clogs of curious peasants. Ah, Dr. Mortimer, Dr. Mortimer, to think that you should not have called me in. You have indeed much to answer for.
I could not call you in, Mr. Holmes, without disclosing these facts to the world, and I have already given my reasons for not wishing to do so. Besides,
Why do you hesitate?
there is a realm in which the most acute and most experienced of detectives is hopeless.
You mean that the thing is supernatural?
I did not positively say so.
No, but you evidently think it.
Since the tragedy, Mr. Holmes, there have come to my ears several incidents which are hard to reconcile with the settled order of nature.
For example,
I find that before the terrible event occurred, several people had seen a creature upon the moor which corresponds with this Baskerville demon, and which could not possibly be any animal known to science. They all agreed that it was a huge creature, luminous, ghastly, and spectral. I have cross-examined these men, one of them a hard-headed countryman, one a farrier, and one a moorland farmer, who all tell the same story of this dreadful apparition, exactly corresponding to the hellhound of the legend. I assure you that there is a reign of terror in the district, and it is a hardy men who will cross the moor at night.
and you, a trained man of science, believe it to be supernatural?
I do not know what to believe.
Holmes shrugged his shoulders. I have hitherto confined my investigations to this world, said he. In a modest way, I have combated evil, but to take on the father of evil himself would perhaps be too ambitious a task. Yet you must admit that the footmark is material.
The original Hound was material enough to tug a man's throat out, and yet he was but diabolical as well.
I see that you have quite gone over to the supernaturalists. But now, Dr. Mortimer, tell me this. If you hold these views, why have you come to consult me at all? You told me in the same breath that it is useless to investigate Sir Charles's death, and that you desire me to do it.
I did not say that I desired you to do it.
Then how can we assist you?
By advising me as to what I should do with Sir Henry Baskerville, who arrives at Waterloo Station.
Dr. Mortimer looked at his watch.
In exactly 1 hour and a quarter.
He being the heir?
Yes. On the death of Sir Charles, we inquired for this young gentleman and found that he had been farming in Canada. From the accounts which have reached us, he is an excellent fellow in every way. I speak now, not as a medical man, but as a trustee and executor of Sir Charles's will.
There is no other claimant, I presume?
None. The only other kinsman whom we have been able to trace was Roger Baskerville, the youngest of 3 brothers, of whom Sir Charles was the elder. The second brother, who died young, is the father of this lad, Henry. The third, Roger, was the black sheep of the family. He came of the old masterful Baskerville strain, and was the very image, they tell me, of the family picture of old Hugo. He made England too hot to hold him, fled to Central America, and died there in 1876 of yellow fever. Henry is the last of the Baskervilles. In 1 hour and 5 minutes I meet him at Waterloo Station. I have had a wire that he arrived at Southampton this morning. Now, Mr. Holmes, what would you advise me to do with him?
Why should he not go to the home of his fathers?
It seems natural, does it not? And yet consider that every Baskerville who goes there meets with an evil fate. I feel sure that if Sir Charles could have spoken with me before his death, he would have warned me against bringing this, the last of the old race, and the heir to great wealth, to that deadly place. And yet, it cannot be denied that the prosperity of the whole poor, bleak countryside depends upon his presence. All the good work which has been done by Sir Charles will crush to the ground if there is no tenant in the hall. I fear lest I should be swayed too much by my own obvious interest in the matter, and that is why I bring the case before you and ask for your advice.
Holmes considered this for a little time. Put into plain words, the matter is this, said he. In your opinion, there is a diabolical agency which makes Dartmoor an unsafe abode for a Baskerville. That is your opinion?
At least I might go the length of saying there is some evidence that this may be so.
Exactly. But surely, if your supernatural theory be correct, it could work the young man evil in London as easily as in Devonshire. A devil with merely local powers like a parish vestry would be too inconceivable a thing.
You put the matter more flippantly, Mr. Holmes, than you would probably do if you were brought into personal contact with these things. Your advice, then, as I understand, is that the young man will be as safe in Devonshire as in London. He comes in 50 minutes. What would you recommend?
I recommend, sir, that you take a cab, call off your spaniel who is scratching at my front door, and proceed to Waterloo to meet Sir Henry Baskerville.
And then?
And then you will say nothing to him at all until I have made up my mind about the matter.
How long will it take you to make up your mind?
24 hours. At 10 o'clock tomorrow, Dr. Mortimer, I will be much obliged to you if you will call upon me here, and it will be of help to me in my plans for the future if you will bring Sir Henry Baskerville with you.
I will do so, Mr. Holmes.
He scribbled the appointment on his shirt cuff and hurried off in a strange, purring, absent-minded fashion. Holmes stopped him at the head of the stair. Only one more question, Dr. Mortimer. You say before that Sir Charles Baskerville's death, several people saw this apparition upon the moor.
3 people did.
Did any see it after?
I have not heard of any.
Thank you. Good morning. Holmes returned to his seat with that quiet look of inward satisfaction which meant he had a congenial task before him. Going out, Watson?
Unless I can help you.
No, my dear fellow, it is at the hour of action that I turn to you for aid. But this is splendid, really unique from some points of view. When you pass Bradley's, would you ask him to send up a pound of the strongest shag tobacco? Thank you. It would be as well if you could make it convenient not to return before evening. Then I should be very glad to compare impressions as to this most interesting problem which has been submitted to us this morning. I knew that seclusion and solitude were very necessary for my friend in these hours of intense mental concentration, during which he weighed every particle of evidence, constructed alternative theories, balanced one against the other, and made up his mind as to which points were essential and which immaterial. I therefore spent the day at my club and did not return to Baker Street until evening. It was nearly 9 o'clock when I found myself in the sitting room once more. My first impression as I opened the door was that a fire had broken out, for the room was so filled with smoke that the light of the lamp upon the table was blurred by it. As I entered, however, my fears were set at rest, for it was the acrid fumes of strong coarse tobacco which took me by the throat and set me coughing. Through the haze I had a vague vision of Holmes in his dressing gown, coiled up in an armchair, with his black clay pipe between his lips. Several rows of paper lay around him. "Caught cold, Watson?" said he. "No, it's this poisonous atmosphere." I suppose it is pretty thick now that you mention it."
"Thick? It is intolerable."
"Open the window, then. You've been at your club all day, I perceive."
"My dear Holmes."
"Am I right?"
"Certainly, but how—"
He laughed at my bewildered expression. "There is a delightful freshness about you, Watson, which makes it a pleasure to exercise any small powers which I possess, at your expense. A gentleman goes forth on a showery and miry day. He returns immaculate in the evening with the gloss still on his hat and his boots. He has been a fixture, therefore, all day. He is not a man with intimate friends. Where, then, could he have been? Is it not obvious?"
"Well, it is rather obvious."
"The world is full of obvious things which nobody by any chance ever observes. Where do you think that I have been?"
"A fixture also."
"On the contrary, I have been to Devonshire." "In spirit?" "Exactly. My body has remained in this armchair, and has, I regret to observe, consumed in my absence 2 large pots of coffee and an incredible amount of tobacco. After you left, I sent down to Stamford's for the ordnance map of this portion of the moor, and my spirit has hovered over it all day." I flatter myself that I could find my way about.
A large-scale map, I presume.
Very large.
He unrolled one section and held it over his knee.
Here you have the particular district which concerns us. That is Baskerville Hall in the middle.
With a wood round it.
Exactly. I fancy the yew alley, though not marked under that name, must stretch along this line, with the moor as you perceive upon the right of it. This small clump of buildings here is the hamlet of Grimpen, where our friend Dr. Mortimer has his headquarters. Within a radius of 5 miles there are, as you see, only a very few scattered dwellings. Here is Laughter Hall, which was mentioned in the narrative. There is a house indicated here which may be the residence of the naturalist. Stapleton, if I remember right, was his name. Here are 2 moorland farmhouses, High Tor and Foulmire. Then 14 miles away, the great convict prison of Princetown. Between and around these scattered points extends the desolate, lifeless moor. This, then, is the stage upon which tragedy has been played and upon which we may help to play it again.
It must be a wild place.
Yes, the setting is a worthy one. If the devil did desire to have a hand in the affairs of men,
then you are yourself inclining to the supernatural explanation.
The devil's agents may be of flesh and blood, may they not? There are 2 questions waiting for us at the outset. The one is whether any crime has been committed at all. The second is, what is the crime, and how was it committed? Of course, if Dr. Mortimer's surmise should be correct, and we are dealing with forces outside the ordinary laws of nature, there is an end of our investigation, but we are bound to exhaust all other hypotheses before falling back upon this one. I think we'll shut that window again if you don't mind. It is a singular thing, but I find that a concentrated atmosphere helps a concentration of thought. I've not pushed it to the length of getting into a box to think, but that is the logical outcome of my convictions. Have you turned the case over in your mind?
Yes, I have made a good deal of it in the course of the day.
What do you make of it?
It is very bewildering.
It is certainly a character of its own. There are points of distinction about it. That change in the footprints, for example. What do you make of that?
Mortimer said that the man had walked on tiptoe down that portion of the alley.
He only repeated what some fool had said at the inquest. Why should a man walk on tiptoe down the alley?
What then?
He was running, Watson. Running desperately, running for his life, running until he burst his heart and fell dead upon his face.
Running from what?
There lies our problem. There are indications that the man was crazed with fear before ever he began to run.
How can you say that?
I am presuming that the cause of his fears came to him across the moor. If that were so, and it seems most probable, only a man who has lost his wits would have run from the house instead of towards it. If the gypsy's evidence may be taken as true, he ran with cries for help in the direction where help was least likely to be. Then again, whom was he waiting for that night, and why was he waiting for him in the yew alley rather than in his own house?
You think that he was waiting for someone?
The man was elderly and infirm. We can understand his taking his evening stroll, but the ground was damp and the night inclement. Is it natural that he should stand for 5 or 10 minutes, as Dr. Mortimer, with more practical sense than I should have given him credit for, deduced from the cigar ash?
But he went out every evening.
I think it unlikely that he waited at the moor gate every evening. On the contrary, the evidence is that he avoided the moor. That night he waited there. It was the night before he made his departure for London. The thing takes shape, Watson. It becomes coherent. Might I ask you to hand me my violin, and we will postpone all further thought upon this business until we have had the advantage of meeting Dr. Mortimer and Sir Henry Baskerville in the morning. Chapter 4. Sir Henry Baskerville. Our breakfast table was cleared early, and Holmes waited in his dressing gown for the promised interview. Our clients were punctual to their appointment, for the clock had just struck 10 when Dr. Mortimer was shown up, followed by the young baronet. The latter was a small, alert, dark-eyed man about 30 years of age, very sturdily built, with thick black eyebrows and a strong, pugnacious face. He wore a ruddy-tinted tweed suit, and had the weather-beaten appearance of one who has spent most of his time in the open air, and yet there was something in his steady eye, and the quiet assurance of his bearing, which indicated the gentleman.
"This is Sir Henry Baskerville,"
said Dr. Mortimer.
"Why, yes," said he. "And the strange thing is, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, that if my friend here had not proposed coming round to you this morning, I should have come on my own account. I understand that you think out little puzzles, and I've had one this morning which wants more thinking out than I am able to give it."
Pray, take a seat, Sir Henry. Do I understand you to say that you have yourself had some remarkable experience since you arrived in London?
"Nothing of much importance, Mr. Holmes. Only a joke, as like as not. It was this letter, if you can call it a letter, which reached me this morning."
He laid an envelope upon the table, and we all bent over it. It was of common quality, greyish in colour. The address, Sir Henry Baskerville, Northumberland Hostel, was printed in rough characters, the postmark Charing Cross, and the date of posting the preceding evening. "Who knew that you were going to the Northumberland Hotel?" asked Holmes, glancing keenly across at our visitor.
"No one could have known. We only decided after I met Dr. Mortimer."
"But Dr. Mortimer was no doubt already stopping there."
"No, I had been staying with a friend," said the doctor. "There was no possible indication that we intended to go to this hotel."
Someone seems to be very deeply interested in your movements." Out of the envelope he took a half-sheet of foolscap paper, folded into four. This he opened and spread flat upon the table. Across the middle of it a single sentence has been formed by the expedient of pasting printed words upon it. It ran, "As you value your life or your reason, keep away from the moor." The word "moor" only was printed in ink.
"Now," said Sir Henry Baskerville, "perhaps you will tell me, Mr. Holmes, what in thunder is the meaning of that, and who it is that takes so much interest in my affairs?"
What do you make of it, Dr. Mortimer? You must allow that there is nothing supernatural about this, at any rate.
"No, sir, but it might very well come from someone who is convinced that the business is supernatural." "What business?" asked Sir Henry sharply. "It seems to me that all you gentlemen know a great deal more than I do about my own affairs."
"You shall share our knowledge before you leave this room, Sir Henry. I promise you that," said Sherlock Holmes. "We will confine ourselves, for the present, with your permission, to this very interesting document, which must have been put together and posted yesterday evening. Have you yesterday's Times, Watson?" "It is here, in the corner." "Might I trouble you for it? The inside page, please, with the leading articles." He glanced swiftly over it, running his eyes up and down the columns. "Capital article, this on free trade. Permit me to give you an extract from it. You may be cajoled into imagining that your own special trade or your own industry will be encouraged by a protective tariff, but it stands to reason that such legislation must in the long run keep away wealth from the country, diminish the value of our imports, and lower the general conditions of life in this island. What do you think of that, Watson?" cried Holmes in high glee, rubbing his hands together with satisfaction. "Don't you think that is an admirable sentiment?" Dr. Mortimer looked at Holmes with an air of professional interest, and Sir Henry Baskerville turned a pair of puzzled, dark eyes upon me. "I don't know much about the tariff and things of that kind," said he, "but it seems to me we've
got a bit off the trail so far as that note is concerned?
On the contrary, I think we're particularly hot upon the trail, Sir Henry. Watson here knows more about my methods than you do, but I fear that even he has not quite grasped the significance of this sentence.
No, I confess that I see no connection.
And yet, my dear Watson, there is so very close a connection that the one is extracted out of the other. You, your, life, reason, value, keep away from the. Don't you see now whence these words have been taken?
By thunder, you're right. Well, if that isn't smart, cried Sir Henry.
If any reasonable doubt remained, it is settled by the fact that keep away and from the are cut out in one piece.
Well now, so it is. Really, Mr. Holmes, this exceeds anything which I could have imagined,
said Dr. Mortimer, gazing at my friend in amazement.
I could understand anyone saying that the words were from a newspaper, but that you should name which, and add that it came from the leading article, is really one of the most remarkable things which I have ever known. How did you do it?
I presume, Doctor, that you could tell the skull of a Negro from that of an Eskimo?
Most certainly.
But how?
Because that is my special hobby. The differences are obvious. The supraorbital crest, the facial angle, the maxillary curve,
But this is my special hobby, and the differences are equally obvious. There is as much difference to my eyes between the leaded bourgeois type of a Times article and the slovenly print of an evening halfpenny paper as there could be between your Negro and your Eskimo. The detection of types is one of the most elementary branches of knowledge to the special expert in crime. Though I confess that once when I was very young, I confused the Leeds Mercury with the Western Morning News. But a Times leader is entirely distinctive, and these words could have been taken from nothing else. As it was done yesterday, the strong probability was that we should find the words in yesterday's issue.
So far as I can follow you then, Mr. Holmes,
said Sir Henry Baskerville,
someone cut out this message with a scissors.
Nail scissors, said Holmes. You can see that it was a very short-bladed scissors since the cutter had to take 2 snips over keep away.
That is so. Someone then cut out the message with a pair of short-bladed scissors, pasted it with paste,
gum, said Holmes,
with gum onto the paper. But I want to know why the word more should have been written.
Because he could not find it in print. The other words were all simple and might be found in any issue, but more would be less common.
Why, of course, that would explain it. Have you read anything else in this message, Mr. Holmes?
There are 1 or 2 indications, and yet the utmost pains have been taken to remove all clues. The address, you observe, is printed in rough characters, but the Times is a paper which is seldom found in any hands but those of the highly educated. We may take it, therefore, that the letter was composed by an educated man who wished to pose as an uneducated one, and his effort to conceal his own writing suggests that the writing might be known or come to be known by you. Again, you will observe that the words are not gummed on in an accurate line, but that some are much higher than others. Life, for example, is quite out of its proper place. That may point to carelessness, or may point to agitation and hurry upon the point of the cutter. On the whole, I incline to the latter view, since the matter was evidently important, and it is unlikely that the composer of such a letter would be careless. If he were in a hurry, it opens up the interesting question why he should be in a hurry, since any letter posted up to early morning would reach Sir Henry before he would leave his hotel. Did the composer fear an interruption? And from whom?
We are coming now rather into the region of guesswork,
said Dr. Mortimer. Say, rather, into the region where we balance probabilities and choose the most likely. It is the scientific use of the imagination, but we've always had some material basis on which to start our speculation. Now, you called a guess, no doubt, but I am almost certain that this address has been written in a hotel.
How in the world can you say that?
If you examine it carefully, you will see that both the pen and the ink have given the writer trouble. The pen has spluttered twice in a single word and has run dry 3 times in a short address, showing that there was very little ink in the bottle. Now, a private pen or ink bottle is seldom allowed to be in such a state, and the combination of the two must be quite rare. But you know the hotel ink and the hotel pen, where it is rare to get anything else. Yes, I have very little hesitation in saying that could we examine the wastepaper baskets of the hotels around Charing Cross until we found the remains of the mutilated Times leader, we could lay our hands straight upon the person who sent this singular message. Hello? Hello, what's this? He was carefully examining the foolscap upon which the words were pasted, holding it only an inch or two from his eyes.
Well?
Nothing, said he, throwing it down. It is a blank half-sheet of paper without even a watermark upon it. I think we've drawn as much as we can from this curious letter. And now, Sir Henry, has anything else of interest happened to you since you have been in London?
Why, no, Mr. Holmes, I think not.
You have not observed anyone follow or watch you?
I seem to have walked right into the thick of a dime novel,
said our visitor.
Why in thunder should anyone follow or watch me?
We are coming to that. You have nothing else to report to us before we go into the matter?
Well, it depends upon what you think worth reporting.
I think anything out of the ordinary routine of life well worth reporting. Sir Henry smiled.
I don't know much of British life yet, for I have spent nearly all my time in the States and in Canada. But I hope that to lose one of your boots is not part of this ordinary routine of life over here.
You've lost one of your boots?
My dear sir, cried Dr. Mortimer, it is only mislaid. You will find it when you return to the hotel. What is the use of troubling Mr. Holmes with trifles of this kind? Well, you asked me for anything outside the ordinary routine.
Exactly, said Holmes. However foolish this incident may seem. You have lost one of your boots, you say?
Well, mislaid it, anyhow. I put them both outside my door last night, and there was only one in the morning. I could get no sense out of the chap who cleans them. The worst of it is that I only bought the pair last night in the Strand, and I have never had them on.
If you had never worn them, why did you put them out to be cleaned?
They were tan boots and have never been varnished. That was why I put them out.
Then I understand that on your arrival in London yesterday you went out at once and bought a pair of boots.
I did a good deal of shopping. Dr. Mortimer here went round with me. You see, if I am to be a squire down there, I must dress the part, and it may be that I have got a little careless in my ways out west. Among other things, I bought these brown boots, gave $6 for them, and had one stolen before I even had them on my feet.
It seems a singularly useless thing to steal, said Sherlock Holmes. I confess that I share Dr. Mortimer's belief that it will not be long before the missing boot is found.
And now, gentlemen, said the baronet with decision, it seems to me that I have spoken quite enough about the little that I know. It is time that you kept your promise and gave me a full account of what we are all driving at.
Your request is a very reasonable one, Holmes answered. Dr. Mortimer, I think you could not do better than to tell your story as you told it to us. Thus encouraged, our scientific friend drew his papers from his pocket and presented the whole case as he had done upon the morning before. Sir Henry Baskerville listened with the deepest attention and with an occasional exclamation of surprise.
Well, I seem to have come into an inheritance with a vengeance, said he when the long narrative was finished. Of course, I've heard of the Hound ever since I was in the nursery. It's the pet story of the family, though I never thought of taking it seriously before. But as to my uncle's death, well, it all seems boiling up in my head, and I can't get it clear yet. You don't seem quite to have made up your mind whether it's a case for a policeman or a clergyman.
Precisely.
And now there's this affair of the letter to me at the hotel. I suppose that fits into its place. It seems to show that someone knows more than we do about what goes on upon the moor,
said Dr. Mortimer. And also, said Holmes, that someone is not ill-disposed towards you, since they warn you of danger.
or it may be that they wish, for their own purposes, to scare me away.
Well, of course that is possible also. I am very much indebted to you, Dr. Mortimer, for introducing me to a problem which presents several interesting alternatives. But the practical point which we now have to decide, Sir Henry, is whether or not it is advisable for you to go to Baskerville Hall.
Why should I not go?
There seems to be danger.
Do you mean danger from this family fiend, or do you mean danger from human beings?
Well, that is what we have to find out.
Whichever it is, my answer is fixed. There is no devil in hell, Mr. Holmes, and there is no man upon earth who can prevent me from going into the home of my own people, and you may take that to be my final answer.
His dark brows knitted and his face flushed to a dusky red as he spoke. It was evident that the fiery temper of the Baskervilles was not extinct in this their last representative.
Meanwhile, said he, I have hardly had time to think over all that you have told me. It's a big thing for a man you have to understand and to decide at one sitting. I should like to have a quiet hour to myself to make up my mind. Now look here, Mr. Holmes. It's 11:30 now, and I am going back right away to my hotel. Suppose you and your friend Dr. Watson come round and lunch with us at 2. I'll be able to tell you more clearly, then, how this thing strikes me.
Is that convenient to you, Watson? Perfectly. Then you may expect us. Shall I have a cab called?
I'd prefer to walk, for this affair has flurried me rather. I'll join you in a walk, with pleasure,
said his companion. Then we meet again at 2 o'clock. Au revoir, and good morning. We heard the steps of our visitors descend the stair and the bang of the front door. In an instant, Holmes had changed from the languid dreamer to the man of action. Your hat and boots, Watson. Quick! Not a moment to lose. He rushed into his room in his dressing gown and was back again in a few seconds in a frock coat. We hurried together down the stairs and into the street. Dr. Mortimer and Baskerville were still visible about 200 yards ahead of us in the direction of Oxford Street. Shall I run on and stop them? Not for the world, my dear Watson. I am perfectly satisfied with your company if you'll tolerate mine. Our friends are wise, for it is certainly a very fine morning for a walk. He quickened his pace until we had decreased the distance which divided us by about half. Then, still keeping 100 yards behind, we followed into Oxford Street and so down Regent Street. Once our friends stopped and stared into a shop window, upon which Holmes did the same. An instant afterwards he gave a little cry of satisfaction, and following the direction of his eager eyes, I saw that a hansom cab, with a man inside, which had halted on the other side of the street, was now proceeding slowly onward again. There's our man, Watson. Come along. We'll have a good look at him if we can do no more. At that instant I was aware of a bushy black beard and a pair of piercing eyes turned upon us through the side window of the cab. Instantly the trap-door of the top flew up, something was screamed to the driver, and the cab flew madly off down Regent Street. Holmes looked eagerly round for another, but no empty one was in sight. Then he dashed in wild pursuit amid the stream of the traffic, but the start was too great, and already the cab was out of sight. There now, said Holmes bitterly as he emerged panting and white with vexation from the tide of vehicles. Was ever such bad luck and such bad management too? Watson, if you're an honest man, you will record this also and set it against my successes. Who was the man? I have not an idea. A spy? Well, it was evident from what we have heard that Baskerville has been very closely shadowed by someone since he has been in town. How else could it be known so quickly that he was in the Northumberland hotel which he had chosen? If they had followed him the first day, I argued that they would follow him also the second. You may have observed that I twice strolled over to the window while Dr. Mortimer was reading his legend. Yes, I remember. I was looking for loiterers in the street, but I saw none. We are dealing with a clever man, Watson. This matter cuts very deep, and though I've not finally made up my mind whether it is a benevolent or a malevolent agency which is in touch with us, I am conscious always of power and design. When our friends left, I at once followed them in the hopes of marking down their invisible attendant. So wily was he that he had not trusted himself upon foot, but he had availed himself of a cab so that he could loiter behind or dash past them, and so escape their notice. His method had the additional advantage that if they were to take a cab, he was all ready to follow them. It has, however, one obvious disadvantage. It puts him in the power of the cabman. Exactly. What a pity we did not get the number. My dear Watson, clumsy as I have been, you surely do not seriously imagine that I neglected to get the number. Number 2704 is our man, but that is of no use to us for the moment. I fail to see how you could have done more. On observing the cab, I should have instantly turned and walked in the other direction. I should then at my leisure have hired a second cab and followed the first at a respectful distance, or better still, have driven to the Northumberland Hotel and waited there. When our unknown had followed Baskerville home, we should have had the opportunity of playing his own game upon himself and seeing where he made for. As it is, by an indiscreet eagerness, which was taken advantage of with extraordinary quickness and energy by our opponent, we've betrayed ourselves and lost our man. We had been sauntering slowly down Regent Street during this conversation, and Dr. Mortimer with his companion had long vanished in front of us. "There is no object in our following them," said Holmes. "The shadow has departed and will not return. We must see which further cards we have in our hands and play them with decision. Could you swear to that man's face within the cab?" I could swear only to the beard. And so could I, from which I gather that in all probability it was a false one. A clever man upon so delicate an errand has no use for a beard save to conceal his features. Come in here, Watson. He turned into one of the district messenger offices, where he was warmly greeted by the manager. "Ah, Wilson, I see you have not forgotten the little case in which I had the good fortune to help you." "No, sir, indeed I have not. You saved my good name, and perhaps my life." "My dear fellow, you exaggerate. I have some recollection, Wilson, that you had among your boys a lad named Cartwright, who showed some ability during the investigation." "Yes, sir, he is still with us." "Could you ring him up? Thank you. And I should be glad to have change for this £5 note." A lad of 14, with a bright, keen face, had obeyed the summons of the manager. He stood now gazing with great reverence at the famous detective. "Let me have the hotel directory," said Holmes. "Thank you. Now, Cartwright, there are the names of 23 hotels here, all in the immediate neighborhood of Charing Cross. Do you see?" "Yes, sir." "You will visit each of these in turn." "Yes, sir." "You will begin in each case by giving the outside porter 1 shilling. Here are 23 shillings." "Yes, sir." "You will tell him that you want to see the waste paper of yesterday. You will say that an important telegram has miscarried and that you are looking for it. You understand?" "Yes, sir." "But what you are really looking for is the center page of the Times, with some holes cut in it with scissors. Here is a copy of the Times. It is this page. You could easily recognize it, could you not?" "Yes, sir." In each case, the outside porter will send for the hall porter, to whom you will give a shilling. Here are 23 shillings. You will then learn in possibly 20 cases out of the 23 that the waste of the day before has been burned or removed. In the 3 other cases, you will be shown a heap of paper, and you will look for this page of the Times among it. The odds are enormously against your finding it. There are 10 shillings over in case of emergencies. Let me have a report by wire at Baker Street before evening. And now, Watson, it only remains for us to find out by wire the identity of the cabman, number 2704, and then we will drop into one of the Bond Street picture galleries and fill in the time until we are due at the hotel. That brings us to the end of chapter 4. Now, again, 2 chapters, and we've had a lot go on. So I believe I'm going to give another 2-chapter summary to help everyone keep up. Chapter 3, The Problem, basically had Dr. Mortimer and Sherlock talk more about the scene in which Charles Baskerville's body was found and the large prints of a hound, as well as discussing whether or not Henry Baskerville, upon arriving, should go to his home estate which he has inherited. Dr. Mortimer was told to come back in 24 hours and bring Henry Baskerville with him, and after leaving, Sherlock basically told Watson as well to leave so that he could spend the better part of the day thinking. When Watson returned, Sherlock told him that he basically studied a map of the area to be familiar with it at least from a distance and understand where Baskerville is in Devonshire and everything else in relation to it. Finding himself very fascinated by the case, the next morning, Dr. Mortimer and Sir Henry Baskerville show up, and they catch him up as well. Basically, Dr. Mortimer describing his own family legend and the article that describes Henry's uncle's passing. They also get Henry also notes that, curiously enough, a strange note made out of newspaper clippings, except for the word "more," which was written in ink, was mailed to him, and that one of his boots, which he bought yesterday upon arriving in London, had been stolen, or at least misplaced, is the charitable and positive outlook. Sherlock Holmes notes that the note is composed mostly of words on the front page of the Times, and they discuss with Henry whether or not it is safe for him to go to his family home. Henry Baskerville, a descendant of the Baskervilles through and through, is hot-tempered and decides that whether supernatural or mortal cause that has plagued his family, nothing is going to stop him from going there. And so he and Mortimer leave and invite Sherlock Holmes to meet them at lunch in a couple of hours so that Henry could have some time to let the case sort of absorb into his mind. After all, much like you, dear listener, a lot of information had been put upon him very quickly in the span of an hour or so. Sherlock and Watson, not men of indecision or inaction, opt to follow behind them, only to notice a cab following Mortimer and Henry Baskerville. Sherlock gets a little too overeager and gets spotted while trying to investigate and sort of observe the driver or the passenger. The cab drives off, and all that Sherlock Holmes can get of it is the cab number, 2704. They walk into a nearby messenger place and enlist the help of a 14-year-old to essentially visit every hotel nearby, 23 in total, and try to find the cut-up paper to identify essentially the person who left the note for Henry. And that brings us to the end of chapter 3 and 4. And that brings us to the end of that summary. Thankfully, while the language was a lot denser, it wasn't a lot of events that happened, so However, I am going to take another small break. I will be right back. I just need to get some hydration and just kind of rest my voice for a moment. But I'll be right back, and just give me a few minutes, and I'll see you soon. Hello, everybody. I'm back. Now, I was thinking, would you like me to do one or two more chapters tonight? Or should I call it there? Because I kind of want to read more, but I don't want to essentially make this too much of a slog for anybody. And I understand that a 2 hour reading stream is pretty good, I think. But you guys, how many chapters do we have left? Um, well, let me see. We have for the Hound of the Baskervilles. We have finished 4 chapters, and we have a total of 11 more. So we have plenty. And after all, I am going to read more of this tomorrow. Also, yes, I have been keeping up with the chat while I was reading, but for obvious reasons, I didn't want to break the immersion in the story. In regards to the cameras in my room, ignore those. Whether or not I stream from them, don't worry about it. My streaming setup is between my parole officer and me. But yeah, there is a total of 15 chapters. If I do 2 more tonight, which is roughly 1 more hour, given the trend of 1 more chapter and see from there. Yeah, okay. Get a third of the way through today. I can maybe... Yeah, then I can basically do this in a total of like 3 sessions. That sounds good to me. Alright, let's do 1 more then, and see where that chapter ends and go from there. Chapter 5. 3 Broken Threads.
Sherlock Holmes had, in a very remarkable degree, the power of detaching his mind at will. For 2 hours, the strange business in which we had been involved appeared to be forgotten, and he was entirely absorbed in the pictures of the modern Belgian masters. He would talk of nothing but art, of which he had the crudest ideas, from our leaving the gallery until we found ourselves at the Northumberland Hotel. "Sir Henry Baskerville is upstairs expecting you," said the clerk. "He asked me to show you up at once when you came." "Have you any objection to my looking at your register?" said Holmes. "Not in the least." The book showed that 2 names had been added after that of Baskerville. One was Theophilus Johnson and family, of Newcastle, the other Mrs. Oldmore and maid, of High Lodge, Alton. "Surely this must be the same Johnson whom I used to know," said Holmes to the porter. "A lawyer, is he not, grey-headed and walks with a limp?" "No, sir, that is Mr. Johnson, the co-owner, a very active gentleman, not older than yourself." "Surely you are mistaken about his trade." "No, sir, he has used this hotel for many years, and he is very well known to us." "Ah, that settles it. Mrs. Oldmore, too. I seem to remember the name. Excuse my curiosity, but often in calling upon one friend, one finds another." "She is an invalid lady, sir. Her husband was once mayor of Gloucester. She always comes to us when she's in town." "Thank you.
I am afraid I cannot claim her acquaintance. We've established the most important fact by these questions, Watson. He continued in a low voice as we went upstairs together. We know now that the people who are so interested in our friend have not settled down in his own hotel. That means that while they are, as we have seen, very anxious to watch him, they are equally anxious that he should not see them. Now, that is a most suggestive fact. What does it suggest? It suggests... Hello, my dear fellow, what on earth is the matter? As we came round the top of the stairs, we had run up against Sir Henry Baskerville himself. His face was flushed with anger, and he held an old and dusty boot in one of his hands. So furious was he that he was hardly articulate, and when he did speak, it was in a much broader and more western dialect than any which we had heard from him in the morning. "Seems to me they are playing me for a sucker in this hotel," he cried. "They'll find they've started in to monkey with the wrong man unless they're careful. By thunder, if that chap can't find my missing boot, there will be trouble. I can take a joke with the best, Mr. Holmes, but they've got a bit over the mark this time." "Still looking for your boot?" "Yes, sir, and mean to find it." "But surely you said that it was a new brown boot." "So it was, sir, and now it's an old black one." "What? You don't mean to say—" "That's just what I do mean to say. I only had 3 pairs in the world. The new one, the old black, and the patent leathers, which I am wearing. Last night they took one of my brown ones, and today they have sneaked one of the black. Well, have you got it? Speak out, man, and don't stand staring." An agitated German waiter had appeared upon the scene. "No, sir. I have made inquiry all over the hotel, but I can hear no word of it." "Well, either that boot comes back before sundown, or I'll see the manager and tell him that I go right straight out of this hotel." "It shall be found, sir. I promise you that if you will have a little patience, it will be found." "Mind it is, for it's the last thing of mine that I'll lose in this den of thieves." "Well, well, Mr. Holmes, you will excuse my troubling you about such a trifle. I think it's well worth troubling about. Why, you look very serious over it." "How do you explain it?" "I just don't attempt to explain it. It seems the very maddest, queerest thing that has ever happened to me." "The queerest, perhaps," said Holmes thoughtfully. "What do you make of it yourself?" "Well, I don't profess to understand it yet. This case of yours is very complex, Sir Henry. When taken in conjunction with your uncle's death, I'm not sure that, of all the 500 cases of capital importance which I have handled, there is one which cuts so deep. But we hold several threads in our hands, and the odds are that one or other of them guides us to the truth. We may waste time in following the wrong one, but sooner or later we must come upon the right." We had a pleasant luncheon in which little was said of the business which had brought us together. It was in the private sitting room to which we afterwards repaired that Holmes asked Baskerville what were his intentions. "To go to the Baskerville Hall." "And when?" "At the end of the week." "On the whole," said Holmes, "I think that your decision is a wise one. I have ample evidence that you are being dogged in London, and amid the millions in this great city it is difficult to discover who these people are or what their object can be. If their intentions are evil, they might do you a mischief, and we should be powerless to prevent it. You did not know, Dr. Mortimer, that you were followed this morning from my house?" Dr. Mortimer started violently. "Followed? By whom?" "That, unfortunately, is what I cannot tell you. Have you among your neighbors or acquaintances on Dartmoor any man with a black full beard?" "No, or let me see. Why, yes. Barrymore, Sir Charles's butler, is a man with a full black beard." "Ha! Where is Barrymore?" "He is in charge of the hall." "We had best ascertain if he is really there, or if by any possibility he might be in London."
"How can you do that?"
"Give me a telegraph form." "Is all ready for Sir Henry?" "That will do. Addressed to Mr. Barrymore, Baskerville Hall. What is the nearest telegraph office?" "Ah, Grimpen. Very good. We will send a second wire to the postmaster, Grimpen. Telegram to Mr. Barrymore to be delivered into his own hand. If absent, please return wire to Sir Henry Baskerville, Northumberland Hotel. That should let us know before evening whether Barrymore is at his post in Devonshire or not."
That's so," said Baskerville. "By the way, Dr. Mortimer, who is this Barrymore, anyhow?" "He is the son of the old caretaker who is dead. They have looked after the Hall for 4 generations now. So far as I know, he and his wife are as respectable a couple as any in the country."
"At the same time," said Baskerville, "it's clear enough that so long as there are none of the family at the Hall, these people have a mighty fine home and nothing to do."
"That is true."
"Did Barrymore profit at all by Sir Charles's will?" asked Holmes. "He and his wife had £500 each." "Ah, did they know they would receive this?"
"Yes, Sir Charles was very fond of talking about the provisions of his will."
"That is very interesting."
"I hope," said Dr. Mortimer, "that you do not look with suspicious eyes upon everyone who received a legacy from Sir Charles, for I also had £1,000 left to me."
"Indeed? And anyone else?"
"There were many insignificant sums to individuals and a large number of public charities. The residue all went to Sir Henry."
"And how much was the residue?"
£740,000.
Holmes raised his eyes in surprise. "I had no idea that so gigantic a sum was involved," said he.
"Sir Charles had the reputation of being rich, but we did not know how very rich he was until we came to examine his securities. The total value of the estate was close on to £1,000,000.
"Dear me! It is a stake for which a man might well play a desperate game. And one more question, Dr. Mortimer. Supposing that anything happened to our young friend here, you will forgive the unpleasant hypothesis, who would inherit this estate?"
Since Roger Baskerville, Sir Charles's younger brother, died unmarried, the estate would descend to the Desmonds, who are distant cousins. James Desmond is an elderly clergyman in Westmoreland."
"Thank you. These details are all of great interest. Have you met Mr. James Desmond?"
"Yes, he once came down to visit Sir Charles. He is a man of venerable appearance and of saintly life. I remember that he refused to accept any settlement from Sir Charles, though he had it pressed upon him."
"And this man of simple taste would be the heir to Sir Charles's thousands?"
"He would be heir to the estate because that is entailed. He would also be the heir to the money unless it were willed otherwise by the present owner, who can, of course, do what he likes with it."
"And have you made your will, Sir Henry?"
"No, Mr. Holmes, I have not. I've had no time, for it was only yesterday that I learned how matters stood. But in any case, I feel that the money should go with the title and estate. That was my poor uncle's idea. How is the owner going to restore the glories of the Baskervilles if he has not money enough to keep up the property? House, land, and dollars must go together."
"Quite so. Well, Sir Henry, I am of one mind with you as to the advisability of your going down to Devonshire without delay. There's only one provision which I must make. You certainly must not go alone."
"Dr. Mortimer returns with me."
"But Dr. Mortimer has his practice to attend to, and his house is miles away from yours. With all the goodwill in the world, he may be unable to help you. No, Sir Henry, you must take with you someone, a trusty man who will always be by your side."
"Is it possible that you could come yourself, Mr. Holmes?"
"If matters came to a crisis, I should endeavor to be present in person, but you can understand that with my extensive consulting practice, and with the constant appeals which reach me from many quarters, it is impossible for me to be absent from London for an indefinite time. At the present instant, one of the most revered names in England is being besmirched by a blackmailer, and only I can stop a disastrous scandal. You will see how impossible it is for me to go to Dartmoor."
"Whom would you recommend, then?"
Holmes laid his hand upon my arm. "If my friend would undertake it, there is no man who is better worth having at your side when you are in a tight place. No one can say so more confidently than I." The proposition took me completely by surprise, but before I had time to answer, Baskerville seized me by the hand and wrung it heartily.
Well, now that is real kind of you, Dr. Watson, said he. You see how it is with me, and you know just as much about the matter as I do. If you'll come down to Baskerville Hall and see me through, I'll never forget it. The promise of adventure had always a fascination for me, and I was complimented by the words of Holmes, and by the eagerness with which the baronet hailed me as companion. I will come, with pleasure, said I. I do not know how I could employ my time better. And you will report very carefully to me, said Holmes. When a crisis comes, as it will do, I will direct how you shall act. I suppose that by Saturday all might be ready. Would that suit Dr. Watson? Perfectly. Then, on Saturday, unless you hear to the contrary, we shall meet at the 10:30 train from Paddington. We had risen to depart when Baskerville gave a cry of triumph, and diving into one of the corners of the room, he drew a brown boot from under a cabinet. "My missing boot!" he cried. "May all our difficulties vanish as easily," said Sherlock Holmes. "But it is a very singular thing," Dr. Mortimer remarked. "I searched this room carefully before lunch." "And so did I," said Baskerville. "Every inch of it." "There was certainly no boot in it then." "In that case, the waiter must have placed it there while we were lunching." The German was sent for, but professed to know nothing of the matter, nor could any inquiry clear it up. Another item had been added to that constant and apparently purposeless series of small mysteries which had succeeded each other so rapidly. Setting aside the whole grim story of Sir Charles's death, we had a line of inexplicable incidents all within the limits of 2 days, which included the receipt of the printed letter, the black-bearded spy in the hansom, the loss of the new brown boot, the loss of the old black boot, and now the return of the new brown boot. Holmes sat in silence in the cab as we drove back to Baker Street, and I knew from his drawn brows and keen face that his mind, like my own, was busy in endeavoring to frame some scheme into which all these strange and apparently disconnected episodes could be fitted. All afternoon and late into the evening he sat lost in tobacco and thought. Just before dinner 2 telegrams were handed in. The first ran, "Have just heard that Barrymore is at the Hall, Baskerville." The second, "Visited 23 hotels as directed, but sorry to report unable to trace cut sheet of times." Well, there go 2 of my threads, Watson. There's nothing more stimulating than a case when everything goes against you. We must cast it round for another scent. We still have the cabman who drove the spy. Exactly. I've wired to get his name and address from the official registry. I should not be surprised if this were an answer to my question. The ring at the bell proved to be something even more satisfactory than an answer, however, for the door opened and a rough-looking fellow entered who was evidently the man himself. "Got a message from the Hill office that a gent at this address had been inquiring for number 2704, said he. "I've driven my cab this 7 years and never a word of complaint. I came here straight from the yard, asking you your face what you had against me." "I have nothing in the world against you, my good man," said Holmes. "On the contrary, I have half a sovereign for you if you will give me a clear answer to my questions." "Well, I've had a good day and no mistake," said the cabman with a grin. "What was it you want to ask, sir?" "First of all, your name and address in case I want you again." "John Clayton, 3 Turfy Street, the Barrow. My cab is out of Shipley's Yard near Waterloo Station." Sherlock Holmes made a note of it. "Now, Clayton, tell me all about the fare who came and watched this house at 10 o'clock this morning and afterwards followed the 2 gentlemen down Regent Street." The man looked surprised and a little embarrassed. "Why, there's no good in my telling you things, for you seem to know as much as I do already," said he. "The truth is that a gentleman told me that he was a detective, and I was to say nothing about him to anyone." "My good fellow, this is a very serious business, and you may find yourself in a pretty bad position if you try to hide anything from me. You say that your fare told you that he was a detective?
Oh, yes, he did. When did he say this? When he left me. Did he say anything more? He mentioned his name. Holmes cast a swift glance of triumph at me. Oh, he mentioned his name, did he? Well, that was imprudent. What was the name that he mentioned? His name, said the cabman, was Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Never have I seen my friend more completely taken aback than by the cabman's reply. For an instant he sat in silent amazement. Then he burst into a hearty laugh. A touch, Watson! An undeniable touch! Said he. I feel a foil as quick and supple as my own. He got home upon me very prettily that time. So, his name was Sherlock Holmes, was it? Sir, that was the gentleman's name. Excellent. Tell me where you picked him up and all that occurred. He hailed me at 9:30 in Trafalgar Square. He said that he was a detective and he offered me 2 guineas if I would do exactly what he wanted all day and ask no questions. I was glad enough to agree. First we drove down to the Northern Hotel. I waited there till 2 gentlemen came out and took a cab from the rank. We followed their cab till it pulled up somewhere near here. At this very door, said Holmes. Well, I couldn't be sure of that, but I dare say my fare knew all about it. We pulled up halfway down the street and waited an hour and a half. Then the 2 gentlemen passed us walking. We followed down Baker Street and along. I know, said Holmes, until we got 3 quarters down Regent Street. And my gentleman threw up the trap and cried I should drive right away to Waterloo Station as hard as I could go. I whipped up the mare and we were there under the 10 minutes. Then he paid up his 2 guineas like a good one and away he went into the station. Only just as he was leaving, he turned around and he said, "It might interest you to know that you've been driving Mr. Sherlock Holmes." That's how I come to know the name. I see. And you saw no more of him? Not after he went to the station. And how would you describe Mr. Sherlock Holmes? The cabman scratched his head. Well, he wasn't altogether such an easy gentleman to describe. I put him at 40 years of age, and he was of a middle height, 2 or 3 inches shorter than you, sir. He was dressed like a toff, and he had a black beard, cut square at the end, and a pale face. I don't know as I could say more than that. The color of his eyes? Oh, I can't say that. Nothing more that you can remember? Oh, sir, nothing. Well then, here is your half-sovereign. There's another one waiting for you if you can bring any more information. Good night. Good night, sir. I thank you. John Clayton departed chuckling, and Holmes turned to me with a shrug of his shoulders and a rueful smile. Ah, snap goes our third thread, and we end where we began, said he. The cunning rascal! He knew our number, knew that Sir Henry Baskerville had consulted me, spotted who I was in Regent Street, conjectured that I had got the number of the cab and would lay my hands on the driver, and so sent back this audacious message. I tell you, Watson, this time we've got a foeman who is worthy of our steel. I've been checkmated in London. I can only wish you better luck in Devonshire, but I'm not easy in my mind about it. About what? About sending you. It's an ugly business, Watson. An ugly, dangerous business. And the more I see of it, the less I like it. Yes, my dear fellow, you may laugh, but I give you my word that I shall be very glad to have you back safe and sound in Baker Street once more. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 5. How are we feeling? I think that's a pretty good cutoff point for today. Looks like this neatly sums up Act 1 of the story, just as well since we are exactly 1/3 of the way through. I will do one more recap just of this chapter before I conclude because, well, you know what? No. Here's what I'll do. I'll do a summary of the entire 5 chapters that I've read so far, so that if anybody has any questions, you can refer back to here, and that way I don't have to try to remember everything by the time I start up tomorrow and do a summation there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give a summary from chapters 1 through 5. It's gonna be a little shorter than the summaries I've already given for chapters 1 through 4, since I know that it'll probably be time-stamped by my lovely parole officer. So, chapter 1 basically has Watson discover a walking stick by a James Mortimer, and after some banter with Sherlock Holmes, they find James Mortimer in a medical directory. They had apparently missed him the previous day, but he comes back after they're done with their musing, and says that he needs Sherlock's help for something. Chapter 2, The Curse of the Baskervilles, has Mortimer basically regaling Holmes and Watson with this tall tale, or supposed tall tale, of a Hugo Baskerville who was a violent man and met a violent end in a manner that is believed to be supernatural, as he was found being killed by a large black hound, larger and more terrifying than any existing on Earth. And then produces a newspaper article of one of his descendants, Charles Baskerville, having passed away in the same moor. And upon revealing some private information that hadn't been made newsworthy or public, confesses that he saw the footprints of a gigantic hound near the body, or near where the body was found. Chapter 3, The Problem, basically has Holmes and Mortimer discussing whether or not it's safe for the last heir of the Baskervilles, Henry, to go to his family home and as part of his inheritance. Mortimer is told to come back the next day with Henry so that Holmes can speak with him directly. And chapter 4, Sir Henry Baskerville, has Holmes speaking directly to Henry, catching him up on the discussion that he and Mortimer had previously had about Charles's passing. And upon being asked whether whether Henry had experienced anything strange upon coming to London from America, he notes that he bought a pair of brown boots, one of which was stolen, only one, not both boots, and that he received a strange letter that seems to advise him against going to the moor, clipped out of the front page of the Times. Henry asks to meet Sherlock and Watson for lunch after kind of letting the case kind of percolate in his head, and Watson and Holmes follow them without them knowing, and they find a suspicious cab driver trailing Mortimer and Henry Baskerville. As soon as Sherlock spots the cab, somebody like frantically shouts and the cab drives off. Sherlock only gets the number of the cab and sends somebody around to investigate, looking for the clipped newspaper, while also basically keeping the number of the cab in mind. Chapter 5, Three Broken Threads, has Sherlock and Watson meeting Baskerville and Mortimer for lunch as agreed, and basically trying to figure out who might have had motive to kill Charles if foul play is to be suspected at all, and find that the man had an extreme amount of wealth, valued his estate being valued at about £1 million, which, keep in mind, this story was written in 19th century England, so that's quite the pretty penny. Um, After the lunch, they find the missing brown boot, but now there's a black boot that is missing. Um, Henry is still resolved to go to Baskerville Hall, but Sherlock advises against going alone and volunteers Watson to travel with him. Upon getting home, there's two telegrams. One that says that the butler is indeed at home, so likely not the one who was in the cab trailing Baskerville. And the other telegram says that the person they sent to find the newspaper was unsuccessful. The cab driver is summoned to the Baker Street apartment, and upon questioning him, they don't really get much information except for the fact that he was tasked with trailing Baskerville and Mortimer all day, and upon leaving, the passenger left his name, and he left his name as Sherlock Holmes. So basically, they have no leads at the moment, and Watson is about to separate from Holmes and travel to Devonshire to Baskerville Baskerville Hall, which actually unnerves and sort of gives Holmes a little bit of anxiety, because now there's clearly somebody who's playing against them and is smart enough to outwit Holmes in his home territory. That leaves us off at the end of Chapter 5 and the end of what I will call Act 1 of The Hound of the Baskervilles. So, yeah, that should do it for today's stream. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm very glad to start doing these reading streams for you all. I hope that you're enjoying the story, and if you're not listening to this for the story, but if you're just using this for background noise to do other chores or stuff, that's fine too. I'm just happy to be part of your day somehow. So come back tomorrow around 8 p.m. PST, same time as I started today, and we will get underway with reading what I will call Act 2 of The Hound of the Baskervilles, which will ideally be chapters 6 through 10. So yeah. Thank you very much for stopping by today. I hope you enjoyed listening. I definitely enjoyed reading to you. Until next time, make sure to eat well, stay hydrated, get some good rest when you can, and of course, unshrimp yourself. Take care, everybody. I'll see you next time. Have a radiant rest of your day. Goodbye.